session. It is Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. It is 1:38 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're in Building 1, Room 280. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser. Joining us via Zoom is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have County Manager Ramiro Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. We have Director of Community Planning and Economic Development, or CPED, Joshua Cummings, as well as the Chair of our Planning Commission, Eric Casino, as well as staff members from CPED joining us in the boardroom as well as via Zoom. The topic on today's agenda is post-hearing briefing, and this is Development Code Docket A27 Non-Conforming Code Update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Similar to the previous item, this item is a little bit one step ahead of the schedule. You held a public hearing. So staff is going to walk you through the comments that you receive again during the public hearing, perhaps the written comments. And then at the end of the session, I will ask if you feel comfortable to bring an AIS for you to consider approval of this proposal. Please.
Good afternoon. Happy to be here, Commissioners. You did have a public hearing on September 27th, and it was relating to an update to the critical areas ordinance for changing permit review procedures for non-conforming uses, structures, and lots. I am here today to summarize and respond to the public testimony and answer any additional questions you may have. The amendments don't change the environmental protections of our critical areas ordinance here in the county. They are changes to the procedure for permit review of non-conforming uses, structures, and lots. There was a reference at the hearing made to how surrounding counties allow for staff review of non-conforming development applications. I did want to let you know that the comments were accurate. Grace Harbor, Lewis, Mason, and Pierce counties all allow staff review of modifications, additions to, or replacement of existing legally constructed homes that don't further impact the critical areas. This code update before you will bring Thurston County in line with our neighboring counties. There was also mention of how the cumulative impact of these changes may degrade critical areas over time. I do want to reiterate that this code update will only change who completes the permit review process, shifting a subset of applications from the hearing examiner to staff, and it will not change our underlying critical areas protections. Further, the 3 project types included in the code update are ones that state guidance tells us have no further impacts on the critical area functions and values. The Department of Fish and Wildlife has even offered to help us review projects in riparian buffers. The Planning Commission saw this as a useful tool to ensure critical areas are protected and recommended that we codify an optional state agency review. As you'll see, the current draft package of amendments does include this provision. Finally, there was a question about standardizing permit reviews for projects in surface water buffer areas. In some cases, we are making riparian buffer reviews consistent with how we currently treat wetland buffers. In other cases, we're making wetland buffers consistent with riparian ones. If that sounds a little bit confusing, it's because it is. So our overarching goal with the code update was to make things more consistent and less confusing for both the public and staff. That'll complete my comments regarding the public testimony, but I am happy to answer any additional questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Commissioner Edwards, questions? Commissioner Edwards, can you hear us?
Hang on. Yes, go ahead.
Do you have any questions, sir?
Not at this point. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Menser, questions, sir?
Questions, okay. You kind of touched on it, but I thought maybe you could expand a little bit on the significance of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. I mean, the minority report took an interpretation that this input or offer of review they wrote can be interpreted as a lack of confidence that the standards established in the proposed code revisions are sufficient to prevent potential loss of critical area habitat. In conversations with you guys, that didn't seem to be at all your interpretation of this. So maybe you could walk us through kind of how we got to that. and what you think that means.
Yeah, in conversations, staff conversations with the staff at Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, they did not express a concern. They did offer their help to review the applications, since this is going to be a change in terms of how we look at non-conforming developments.
And they did not ask for it to be codified. That was a decision by the Planning Commission. So it's not about not trusting our ability to do the reviews at CPED. It's about WDFW providing an extra resource in the Planning Commission saying, hey, that sounds like a good idea, why don't you add that into the code? So I'm not, the interpretation of the request from DFW from the minority report is not something that we can speak to.
Okay, another question was about I think we went through this very early in the process, but I want to restate it and make sure I'm clear about it. There was a concern I heard early on that the language, like, you know, we keep talking about these 3 project types. The question was, is the language tight enough that where these are the 3 project situations and only these, or are these just examples and the language is actually broader and more project types that we didn't anticipate sitting here today will end up falling within its scope, if that question makes sense?
It is just focused on those 3 project types.
That's what I understood, and I just want to make sure that nothing's changed and that everybody sort of hears that, because that was it was stated that maybe this code language wasn't quite as tight as I think that it actually is. I think those were I was going to ask you about the other counties, and so you talked about Grace, Lewis, Mason, and Pierce, you said, okay. And you picked those just because they're closest by?
For this particular analysis, I picked the directly neighboring ones. There are pretty much most of the counties in Western Washington that I've looked at have provisions for administrative review or just, administrative review of non-conforming developments.
And every county, am I right that every county, it's not identical, but every county has some form of critical area ordinance, because state law requires that be the case, okay.
Yeah.
And just to, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just as a reminder, this changes the process to make it more efficient. It does not change any of the underlying environmental protections at all.
So there's no change in what can be permitted, it's simply a matter of what process by which that permit can be.
And at the end, I believe it's going to be saving money to those individuals affected by this, because right now they have to spend significant amount of money just to go through a very cumbersome process. They may end up in the same situation, and this would allow an administrative review, and as a result, will save money to those individuals and residents who may be affected by this. So I believe from a humble perspective is a win-win situation.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards, you have your hand up, sir?
Yes, I was going to comment, but my comments were going to match the county managers for sure. And maybe one thing he left out is that time is money to most people as they're trying to move ahead. And this will expedite that particular portion of it and make it less expensive for them. But I think everything Romero said is right on track there. Thanks.
Thank you. I have a question in regards to the critical areas ordinance and the comment that was made during it and how it would affect that, and I wanted some clarification from you, Ashley, because that's not going to be the case.
Which
Sorry.
Commissioner?
It was one that was against the proposal because it would affect the critical areas and trying to pull up the PowerPoint right now. And so I just kind of wanted to talk about the buffers. If you could go over those buffers, and would the critical areas still be protected? We're not, the expansion of the buffer is not going to affect the critical areas. Am I making myself,
So the 3 project types are really just focused on buffer areas that have already been impacted because there's already an existing development there. And so it's just allowing staff review of those projects that will not have an adverse impact on critical area function and value. So there'll be no change to the critical area buffers.
So just to piggyback on that again, no change to the underlying environmental impact. That means no change to the buffers. So the process as it currently stands, staff would do a staff report. We provide that staff report to the hearings examiner. The applicant would have to go through the waiting period for the hearings examiner, provide information to the hearings examiner. We would reference the code that we currently have, which is the buffers that we currently have. We'd put that in the staff report to the hearings examiner. The hearings examiner would hear the hearing. They would then take all the information that we provided, and the outcome would be approved. So what we're saying is, we know the end of this story. We're not going to change any of the underlying environmental impacts. The buffers don't change, none of that changes. We do the staff report and we provide approval based on the codes that we currently have, which do not change any of the environmental underlying conditions. It's just about that lengthy process with the hearings examiner. And that's where time is money. It saves the applicant the cost of the hearings examiner, whatever supporting material may be needed from external consultants, and it gets them into the window of building before it closes. And you heard testimony from a couple of folks that are currently in this process right now. So there's a piece of this, we talk about how do these development code docket items come to you. This one actually came to you generated through staff, where we were working to balance strategic initiative number 6 and number 7. Number 6 is allow for economic development, and number 7 is to allow for balance with the natural environment. This does that. It does not change environmental regulations, and it does allow for residents to go through the process and save them money in the building of land on their property. So we feel pretty confident in this item and look forward to the board's next steps.
Thank you. Any additional questions, discussion items?
Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Well, I just wanted to point out, being strategic 6 and 7 are met, I'm going to be in favor of this.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay.
So if the board feel comfortable to provide direction to bring in the AIS for you to consider a formal approval of the proposal.
Commissioner Edwards, is that a yes from you?
Yes, it is a yes from me. I was just kidding with you there.
Commissioner Munzer? And a thumbs up.
Okay, so bring in the AIS and we'll push it through. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners.
Schedule.
And Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
we're done, right? So I just want to thank staff and the Planning Commission for all the work that went into this. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it is 1:51 p.m. We are adjourned.
Thank you.